This is the most exciting season in the history of wilderness survival shows. Not only is the survival duration longer, but the process is also more brutal. 10 survival experts were dropped into the Arctic wilderness, with the last one standing to win $500,000. Contestants must build shelters, find food, and constantly guard against attacks from black bears, gray wolves, and moose. They are only allowed to carry 10 specific tools. Contestant Luke is from beautiful Hawaii. Apart from studying the art of glass carving, he ponders how to survive in the wilderness. Growing up in his father's outdoor school, he learned many survival skills like archery, fishing, and shelter building, and is adept at using natural resources to create various wilderness tools. He joined the competition to win the $500,000 and set an example for his son. After watching the crew leave, Luke began to explore the surroundings. Bear tracks everywhere on the beach proclaimed their dominance. Over 40,000 black bears live here. An ordinary person might be terrified, but Luke was prepared for bear hunting. He continued forward and entered an obvious tunnel without hesitation. Soon, he found a grouse, calmly adjusted his angle, aimed, and shot in one smooth sequence, killing it instantly. Seeing the grouse struggle painfully, kind-hearted Luke quickly put it out of its misery. Starting off with such a delicious meal was a great beginning. The next contestant, Lee, has half Azerbaijani blood and is the only contestant who did not gain weight for the season. His slight build seemed out of place in the harsh environment. Living in the primitive forests of Alaska, while other children were studying, he was learning hunting and setting traps. His family lives off fishing, with plenty of fish and meat daily, and hunts moose and black bears in winter, making them true wilderness natives. For others, this is a brutal survival challenge, but for Lee, it's just living in a different place. He owns a small private plane, the only link between his village and the outside world. His goal in the competition is to win the $500,000 to buy a larger plane to serve his tribe. An experienced survivor, he set up a temporary shelter framework in half a day, prepared a moss and lichen bed, and began making a lure pen to continue his family's fishing legacy. Suddenly, a noise from a distant water body made him grab a hoe and cautiously approach the river, only to find an otter playing. The distance was too great for a shot, so Lee had to return empty-handed. The morning of the second day arrived, and a sudden change in wind direction woke Luke up. It also burned several large holes in his sleeping bag. It seemed time to find a better place to camp. But first, he needed to gather some food. Reindeer Lake, with its beautiful scenery and abundant resources, was covered with wild blueberries that were free for the picking. They were sweet and rich in vitamins. As he was collecting them enthusiastically, he suddenly spotted a dark shadow in the distance. Luke determined it was a black bear foraging. He immediately followed it. Faced with this rare opportunity, Luke calmly shot an arrow, which missed the bear entirely. He quickly prepared another arrow and shot again. Watching the fleeing source of protein, Luke was frustrated to the point of swearing. He was so close to becoming the first person in wilderness survival history to hunt a bear. Regrettably, he still had to retrieve his few remaining arrows, as each contestant only had 9, and once they were gone, that was it. On the third day, Taz was woken up by a squirrel in the forest. Angrily grabbing his bow, he rushed out, and soon the sound of a bow firing echoed through the woods. The squirrel became his meal for the day. Taz grew up in rural Brazil and came to work on a farm in the United States to make a living. His tiny treehouse was his home. Growing up in a particularly hard situation, he had to rely on hunting and fishing for food, which forced him to learn many wilderness survival skills, especially tracking large game. His primary goal this time was to hunt a bear and endure until the end to win the $500,000, then bring his wife and children to live a better life. However, food storage was crucial for long-term survival. To increase his fishing success, Taz decided to make a canoe to deploy fishing nets into deeper waters. He used spruce branches for the frame and charred sticks for ribs, paying attention to every detail to perfect the canoe. He worked until late at night, and by the next day, the canoe's frame took shape. After sawing off excess material and reinforcing it with ropes, he covered sharp edges with moss and wrapped it entirely in waterproof fabric, finishing a beautiful canoe. Eager to test it, Taz found the canoe very stable. In contrast, Lee's raft was a bit rough around the edges. He used wire to join logs together, creating a basic and primitive raft. He immediately stepped on it to test it out. finding it had good buoyancy and was very stable. Without any hesitation, he paddled to the place where he last saw the otter, believing that setting a net there would catch big fish. While waiting, he didn't sit idle, but found a spot to start fishing. After battling for half an hour, he hooked a big fish, a 5 or 6 pound lake trout. While cleaning it, he unexpectedly found roe, which he promptly ate. As the day began to darken, Lee hurried to check his fishing net. From a distance, he could see the white belly of a fish on it. Pulling it out of the water, he discovered it was a barracuda. He caught 2 big fish in one day and was quite pleased with himself. He immediately cut a large piece of fish meat and started eating it. The next challenger is Judy, a 45-year-old from Wyoming, USA. While searching for a shelter site, she discovered a large patch of reindeer moss, perfect for bedding. Judy owns her own farm and has lived in the wilderness her whole life. Growing up on horseback, she has always pursued a wild and free lifestyle. She's also an adept hunter and fisher. After considering multiple factors, she found an excellent camping spot near a water source, sheltered from the wind and sun and convenient for gathering firewood and berries, yet not on the path of predatory animals, a truly strategic location. She quickly set up a temporary shelter. Although it looked simple, it was enough to provide shelter from the wind and rain. Alan, the 5th contestant this season, teaches outdoor education at a high school. Although he doesn't have special skills, his passion for archery, which started in his childhood, has won him several championships. Living in northern Canada, he has the advantage of fighting on home ground. He was making a fishing lure that resembled a small fish, crafted from high water content spruce to allow it to sink deeper. Alan's survival strategy is straightforward. Prioritize food. After making the lure, Alan started fishing and unexpectedly caught a huge fish, weighing about 30 to 40 pounds. Without a fishing rod to help with the line tension, manually fishing such a big catch was not easy. That evening, Alan enjoyed a delicious fish soup. To get enough fat, he ate the fish skin and roe clean, although the taste was somewhat unsatisfactory. After a successful first voyage, Taz kept busy weaving fishing nets. Today, the gill net set up on the shore finally caught a big one. He immediately set up a tripod on the shore to smoke and preserve the fish meat. He hung the sliced fish meat on the rack and wrapped it with a thick layer of moss. Next, he waited for the fish meat to slowly dry. With so much food, he could finally sleep well. In the morning, Taz checked the oven and found some remnants still smoldering, thinking to stoke the fire to speed up the drying process. This action ended up burning the fish meat. By the time he fetched water from the lake to extinguish the fire, the fish had turned to charcoal, and the newly acquired food was lost. The 6th contestant, Anne, is 56 years old. Upon landing, she experienced seasickness and felt disoriented. After calming down, she began searching for a campsite to build her shelter. Anne is a survival expert and an organic farmer, and she is also a quick archer. Despite her age, her extensive survival experience is evident. She knows how to waterproof her outer layer with birch oil, sun-dry meats, and identify various plants. Her farming has not been profitable over the years, so she hopes to win the prize money to expand her farm. After setting up her bed, Anne took her bow and arrows and started scouting the area. She found some cranberries and hedgehog mushrooms nearby and also spotted bear droppings. As the weather grew colder and bears needed to eat before hibernating, Anne knew she needed to hunt a bear to win the competition. That evening, Anne cooked a large pot of mushrooms to fuel up for the next day's bear hunt. The next female contestant, Melanie, lives in the mountains with her fiancé, surrounded by chickens, ducks, and dogs. Her life is stable, and she has developed an interest in wilderness survival, honing various skills such as fishing, hunting, and shelter building. She is now a partner at a survival school. Her goal is clear: to focus and quickly build a permanent shelter. Given her height of 1.8 meters, her shelter needs to be larger. By the end of the day, her shelter was mostly complete. Next, she filled the gaps with moss, layering moss and logs for better insulation and stability. By the 6th day, flocks of geese flying south signaled the approaching winter, making building a warm shelter a priority. With plenty of rocks available, Anne decided to build a semi-subterranean shelter for better insulation. She tirelessly dug down, burning a lot of calories. As light rain began to fall, Anne simply put on a raincoat and continued working. She used logs for the structure and moss to fill the gaps. Along the way, she found fresh deer droppings, which excited her as securing a deer could clinch her victory. Meanwhile, Judy was also busy building her shelter, surviving on blueberries and reindeer moss. Thinking of the better heat retention of logs, she decided to build a cabin. However, the intense labor caused blisters on her hands. She applied spruce resin for its anti-inflammatory and antibacterial properties, which also promoted wound healing. After quick treatment, she resumed her work to finish the cabin before winter. On the 7th day of the survival challenge, Cade, having completed his shelter, started his deer hunting plan. He took his bow and arrows and searched along the way, quickly finding moose tracks. Ahead, he spotted gnawed leaves and marks on tree trunks from antlers rubbing against them. With a professional hunter's keen sense, Cade sensed the moose was nearby. He quickly set up his bow and arrows, tore off a piece of bark, rolled it into a horn, and mimicked a moose mating call. The sound was very convincing. Soon, rustling sounds came from the woods. Cade immediately grabbed his bow and rushed forward. He saw antlers. It was a North American caribou, a rare protected species locally. Killing it by mistake could mean a severe punishment. Cade could only watch as the $500,000 prize slipped away. With no deer meat to stave off hunger, Cade had to settle for collecting blueberries. As a professional hunting guide, Cade spends much of the year in the deep mountains, away from his family. As he grows older, he tires of this nomadic life and wants to establish a mounted archery camp to settle down. However, this requires winning the $500,000 prize. He is the only contestant who didn't gain weight before the season, believing hunting and fishing skills are key to long-term survival here. To prove his point, Cade shot down a grouse with a headshot. Sitting by the campfire at night, eating delicious berry-stewed grouse, his confidence in winning increased. Next up is White, a true native Canadian who lives year-round in the cold northern forests, relying solely on hunted meat. He is versatile, adept at hunting on land and fishing at sea, and skilled in butchering and storing. Having hunted with his father since childhood, he has killed countless bears and deer. Competing on home ground, he is more confident in winning the race. White's survival strategy is clear. Fish and berries sustain life, but hunting large animals is key to winning. He set up a woven spike net by the lake, creating an all-day automatic fishing device, freeing him up to hunt. The last contestant, Mickey, has been busy building a shelter, eating only 6 handfuls of berries. Now hungry, he begins to hunt in this unfamiliar area. A carpenter, he excels at creating useful tools from nature, proud of his jungle toilet. From a young age, Mickey learned tracking, hunting, and fishing, mastering wilderness survival skills. He and his beautiful wife work hard, raising 5 sons. He entered the contest for his son with autism, hoping to win the prize for the best medical care. Lost and wandering in the forest without a compass, Mickey soon showed signs of dehydration. Just when I thought he was doomed, he was thrilled to find his campsite ahead. White, returning empty-handed from his hunting trip, pinned his hopes on his automatic fishing device. From a distance, he spotted a large fish hanging from it and let out an ecstatic, almost inhuman cry. The fish, over 1 meter long, would feed him for a good while. White began by gutting it and then roasting it over the fire, thoroughly enjoying his meal. Over the past week, Alan only caught fish on the first day and recently had been surviving on berries and mushrooms. Building a shelter consumed a lot of energy, and he felt his body's resources dwindling. Searching for food could delay the shelter's progress, so he set traps in the forest, hoping for some unwitting protein to walk in. He focused on finishing the shelter, and once the last piece of reindeer moss was in place, his cozy cabin was complete. Without much time to celebrate, Alan hurried to check his traps but heard growling from afar. Approaching, he discovered a fox caught in one, furiously digging and glaring at him. It was a rare protected animal, clearly furious at being trapped. Alan quickly moved to release it, but the fox's aggressive reactions forced him to cover it with his jacket and cut the trap to free it. Feeling compassion, Alan destroyed all his traps, deciding to rely on fishing for food in the future. The scene shifts to Mickey, whose feet were emitting white smoke. Initially thought to be from the cold, he revealed it was actually his athlete's foot, embarrassingly potent enough to be sensed through the screen. Perhaps driven by the pungent smell, he grabbed his bow and arrows and headed out, following the sound of flapping wings. He soon found a grouse. To avoid startling it, he held his breath and crept closer. then easily shot it down with his bow. Returning to camp with his prize, Mickey began plucking and cooking the bird, enjoying his first wild meal since arriving. Meanwhile, Cade, who was hunting in the wild, spotted a group of wild ducks in a lake. Unfortunately, they were out of shooting range. Cade had to look for other prey and followed an animal trail. However, he realized he had lost his quiver and hurried back to look for it, but found nothing. To date, he has caught 11 fish, smoked some for jerky to ensure daily energy intake, but Luke knows that this amount of food won't win him the $500,000 prize. Therefore, he collects blueberries daily, cooks them, and dries them into fruit leather for storage. Now, with enough food, he prioritizes building a permanent shelter on a wind-shielded sunny slope. He digs with a trenching shovel, uses the excavated soil for walls, and builds a frame with logs, covered with moss and a waterproof sheet for insulation. Cade, who lost his quiver, was so upset he almost quit the competition. After a few days, he recovered and set some traps in the woods, but caught nothing. As a professional hunter, Cade refused to give up hunting and began making his own arrows. He smoothed branches with a knife, stabilized the center of gravity with wire at the top, and tied grouse feathers at the tail with fishing line for stability. He decorated the arrows with charcoal. The homemade arrows were complete, and he tested one by shooting it at a wooden target tied to a tree. The arrow hit its mark, helping him overcome the embarrassment of losing his arrows. By the 15th day, Lee had been busy building a shelter, mostly eating berries and concocting a purple health soup from birch bark and berries. Despite its bitter taste, it had anti-inflammatory properties. He hadn't caught any fish recently, though he expected to today. He continued working, using large trees to build a sturdy hunting cabin for bear hunting, a skill taught by his father. After days of hard work, his hunting cabin took shape. Despite unsuccessful fishing trips, he worked on an empty stomach, his efficiency decreasing. To withstand temperatures below 50 degrees, he persevered, covering the roof with thick moss and a waterproof sheet, and installing a small door. That night, Lee stayed in the cabin, but hunger and the wind outside kept him awake. On the third day, he got up early to go fishing but failed to catch anything even after trying for a long time. Even the highly anticipated fishing net came up empty. Faced with his distorted, hungry reflection, Lee could no longer bear it. He pulled out his phone and dialed the number, announcing, "This is Lee, I am officially clocking out." With that, Lee ended his participation on day 18, becoming the first to withdraw. Suddenly announcing his withdrawal, Wyatt found several otters swimming at the lake, indicating a rich fish presence nearby. Hungry, he swiftly set up a gill net, then took out his secret weapon, ready for a big catch. He used spruce logs and bright yellow trap lines as bait, the vivid colors contrasting with the surroundings to attract fish from afar. Despite various attempts today, his luck seemed off. Reluctantly, he changed fishing spots, and unexpectedly, the new spot was fruitful. With a cast, Wyatt felt a tug and hauled in a big fish. This catch would feed him for 3 days. He placed the fish in a nearby live pool and continued fishing while the iron was hot, catching another fish, sustaining him for a week. Wyatt was thrilled. But as dusk fell, he was too lazy to process the fish and decided to keep them in the pool, spending a restless night. The next morning, Wyatt rushed to the fish pool, only to be stunned as all the fish had disappeared. For Anne, obtaining food was much harder than for the younger contestants. Just building a shelter had exhausted a lot of her energy. Today, she finally set aside her work to go hunting and quickly spotted grouse tracks. With a sly smile, she raised her bow and hit her target. Just as she was about to fire, she heard a noise by the lake. Anne quickly grabbed her bow and arrow and followed the sound, only to find a moose, unfortunately out of shooting range. The scene shifts to Cade. After successfully testing an arrow, he began mass-producing them. Suddenly, he heard the sound of a grouse flapping its wings. Startled, he quickly grabbed his bow and arrow and chased after it. This game came just in time to test his new arrow. Before he knew it, the grouse was in hand. Cade then started building a stove. He scraped moss off stones and built a pit. Once the fire was lit, he could eat. The chicken soup aroma filled the air, satisfying his long, hungry stomach. After eating, Cade went to the river to drink some water. During that short time, his stove caught fire. He hurriedly used a bucket to fetch water and extinguish the fire. In contrast, Alan has been the most stable contestant so far. Let's visit his house. The outer layer is covered with moss and spruce, and the floor is lined with pine branches. He even made a stone fire pit and installed a skylight in the roof. After securing his shelter, he focused on food. He has been fishing with a line, reaping a rich harvest almost daily. Today was no exception. He quickly dragged a big fish ashore, securing a week's worth of meals. On day 19 of the competition, Anne tried to mimic the call of a moose. Since eating the grouse, she had not cooked again. Unfortunately, no moose responded. Sitting on a stump, she felt her heart racing and her body weakening. At 56, and with the strain of the past days, she was overwhelmed. Back at the shelter, she drank some hot water but felt ill. After a few minutes, she resolved to call it quits. Thus, Anne withdrew from the competition. Despite her strong will, physical reasons forced her to give up. On day 18, after consuming several fish jerky, Luke completed his wilderness mansion. To compensate for the food lost over the days, he immediately went to the lake to fish. Soon he felt movement on the hook and rhythmically reeled in the line, easily pulling up a large lake fish. With this line, he had already caught 16 fish, hanging most outside his shelter, with 3 still unprocessed by the shore. To speed up the smoking process, he carved a hole in the wall, supported by rocks on both sides and the top, not only for cooking fish, but also for heating. As night fell and he sat in his mansion eating the small dried fish, he soon felt unwell, starting to vomit and experience diarrhea. The next day, Cade continued his routine patrol and hunting. Despite eating many grouse, he was still losing weight, highlighting the difficulties of surviving in the wild. Upon seeing blueberries, he couldn't move and began frantically devouring them on the spot. Moving forward, he was attracted by a fresh, warm pile of bear droppings, indicating a black bear was nearby. Excited, Cade vowed to hunt it to advance to the final round. Knowing his wooden arrows would be insufficient, he returned to camp to start crafting new ones, focusing on the arrowheads which he wrapped with scavenged metal. After repeatedly heating and sharpening them to penetrate bear fur and heat-treating the shaft to remove moisture and increase hardness, he added tail feathers to stabilize the arrow. The powerful arrow was now ready, and Cade declared the start of his bear hunting mode. Meanwhile, White spotted a mink fishing in a pool, suspecting it had stolen his fish. Despite his frustration, he couldn't harm the protected animal. White then caught a large fish and, not taking any chances, quickly cleaned it and placed it on the grill. By the 20th day, Luke had endured a terrible night. He tried to sleep on a grassy area but suffered severe stomach issues, suspecting the water was contaminated. Considering continuing might worsen his health, he reached for his phone to call for evacuation. Just as he was about to make the call, he saw a black bear. Grabbing his bow and arrows, he chased and shot at it, but missed due to the distance. Calming down, he realized it was a mother bear with her cub foraging. This sighting allowed him to peacefully withdraw from the competition. Soon, a speedboat approached, creating a wake on the water. Facing the camera, Luke was visibly relieved, but choked up momentarily. Despite having a warm shelter and ample food, he had to leave due to health reasons, which was hard to accept. Silently packing his bags, Luke left, filled with regret. On the 19th day of the survival challenge, Taz got up and tidied his hair before cooking himself a big fish meal. After eating, he happily checked his gill net and saw a large fish from afar. Excited, he quickly stripped off his clothes to retrieve it. Carrying the big fish, he joyfully returned to camp to slice and smoke it for preservation. While he was busy, an uninvited guest silently crept in. By day 21, Judy, who had been busy building a shelter, finally finished just before it started to snow. The cabin, built with quality materials and fine craftsmanship, had all its gaps filled with moss. She fetched some fresh water from the lake and slowly boiled it on the stove, enjoying the smoky ambiance. As the temperature rose and the snow began to melt, Judy went out to bring back some logs to make a wooden door for the cabin, completing the final step in the building process. Once installed, the indoor temperature increased significantly. With winter and heavy snow approaching, everything would become wet. Melanie felt it necessary to build a shelter for storing food and firewood. She used 4 trees at the shelter's entrance, reinforcing the base with some wooden sticks, then built up 3 walls with logs and moss. The roof was neatly covered with short logs and moss to prevent rain and snow. From the start, Melanie had been surviving on berries and bark. Though she attempted fishing, all efforts had failed until today, when she unexpectedly caught a fish, which then escaped, taking her hook with it. Fortunately, she had plenty of spare hooks, creatively stored in a unique container she hadn't thought of earlier. Ingeniously, she tore off her pink underwear to use as bait, which surprisingly worked well. She caught a fish steadily this time and cooked it over a large fire at camp, providing protein many times that of beef. Earlier, Taz had set many traps in the forest. Now was the time to check them. Seeing many animal tracks along the way, he expected a good haul. Indeed, he found a squirrel in one of the traps, a welcome change from fish. He quickly cleaned it by the water, but when he returned to the shelter, he found the smoked fish had been stolen. Grabbing his bow and arrows, he followed the tracks but couldn't find the culprit. He had to think of another way to protect his food. Removing tree bark effectively prevented animals from climbing. He then crafted a wooden box using wire and sticks, and with the help of a ladder, placed it 4 meters high in a tree. The height made it difficult even for him to access, ensuring the food was safe from theft. By day 22, as the weather grew colder, obtaining food became increasingly difficult. Judy, already having lost 25 kilograms, was now boiling bark out of desperation. Her body was craving protein. She had relied on berries while building the shelter, thinking she would start hunting once it was finished. However, her high standards for the shelter led her to keep filling gaps with moss. Missing her family too much, Judy decided to quit the competition. On day 20 of the survival challenge, Cade found his belt had loosened again. He cut off the excess and threw it into the pot with some mushrooms, hoping to extract some oils to replenish his body. He tried eating a piece but found it hard to swallow, so he got up to look for other food. Due to prolonged malnutrition, he was dizzy and almost fell, which frightened him into squatting down and stuffing blueberries into his mouth to regain energy before continuing on his way. Soon, he found bear feces and a nearby animal trail. To wait for the bear, he started collecting branches to conceal himself. Having relied on berries, his body was desperately craving protein. After waiting a while without seeing any bears, he impatiently searched for other prey. He soon heard a squirrel and slowly approached the target. He shot an arrow, but it hit a tree. He needed to retrieve it. So after eating some blueberries for energy, Cade climbed the tree to catch the squirrel. Unfortunately, he was left with a scratch from the squirrel, posing a risk of infection. As the weather grew colder, finding food became even more difficult. Alan's gill net caught nothing again, so he went back to fishing. He immediately got a bite, and, though it was just a small fish, he soon caught many more. On day 21, as snowflakes fell from the sky, Mickey was glad he had prepared in advance. He had been hunting partridges to obtain fat and now targeted nearby mice, annoyed by them nibbling his ears at night. He sharpened a few sticks, interlocked them to form a stable structure, and used a lever principle to support a stone slab, placing a mushroom as bait to hopefully catch a mouse to taste. Surprisingly, the trap worked. Mickey savored the hard-earned food and even turned the mouse skin into an art piece. Meanwhile, White had already successfully caught 6 big fish. Today, he joyously kissed another fish he caught, but his happiness lasted only seconds before the hook was lost forever, leaving White heartbroken. Each contestant has only 4 anchors. Losing one is a disaster. They can now only make new ones from other materials. After some effort, the new hook, named Golden Fury, is completed. To prevent another loss, it's reinforced with a metal leader to stop big fish from taking it. However, things don't always go as planned. When he's ready to conquer the waters again, the new Golden Fury is lost. Wyatt is devastated. Meanwhile, Cade's bear hunting is going slowly. He's been surviving on mushrooms, getting weaker each day. Still, he continues hunting, believing he will find a bear. He finds some feces with fresh blueberries and eats them, adhering to his principle of not wasting food. He faints from low blood sugar and wakes up an hour later, crying from the overwhelming desire to win. Even after losing an arrow, he doesn't give up due to his strong will. Unfortunately, he must leave the competition for health reasons, leaving with deep regret after 24 days.